Have you ever been asked this in a job interview? Tell me about a time when you didn't agree with your boss. What would you say? This is what's called a behavioral interview question, and it's a common tactic. Employers use this kind of question to explore your fit for a job based on your past experience. It can be an easy question to answer if you have the right strategy. I show you how to answer these gotcha questions in our free Max List guide, 100 Behavioral Interview Questions You Need to Know. To get your copy, visit maxlist.org/questions. You'll also learn 4 simple steps for answering any behavioral interview question. Again, that's maxlist.org/questions. You can count on getting these questions in your next interview. Why not get the answers before you walk into the interview room? Go to maxlist.org/questions. This is Find Your Dream Job, the podcast that helps you get hired, have the career you want, and make a difference in life. I'm your host, Mac Pritchard. I'm also the founder of Max List. It's a job board in the Pacific Northwest that helps you find a fulfilling career. Every Wednesday, I talk to a different expert about the tools you need to get the work you want. Many people are unhappy at work. One reason this can happen, you say yes to the wrong opportunities. And you do this not once, but again and again. Patricia Ortega is here to talk about why you keep taking the wrong job. She's a career coach who helps you forge a new path, find a revitalized purpose, and make a positive impact. Patricia also hosts the excellent Uncommon Career podcast. She joins us from Dallas, Texas. Well, let's jump into it, Patricia. We're talking about why you keep taking the wrong job. What makes a job the wrong job?
Yeah, what makes a job? Lots of things. Sometimes it has to do with the type of work that you're doing, that you think you liked that work, or you sought it out for what it felt like in theory, but it's much different in practice. Lawyer is an epitome, right, of that concept. For every hour that is shown on TV in the courtroom, there's 10 hours in a library by yourself in a ton of books that are very dense, right? And so that's one of the reasons. But there's just such a variety of reasons. It could be that. It could be finding yourself in a situation where you went after a career originally for the money, right? Expectations that your family had on you, or what it means to be successful when you're young. And you get this degree, and now it feels like a waste to go after a career in a different area, even though, spoiler alert, it's not a waste, but it may feel like, well, I'm not fulfilling or finishing the goal that I set out to. And so sometimes that can feel like a failure, and that drives us towards careers that maybe aren't the best fit for the sake of finishing something out. And then I think the last thing would probably be that there's maybe some situations in the past that drove us away from some things, and then that guides us towards something. But because we're not fixated on what it is that we're going towards, we're actually fixated on what we're moving away from, it leads us to a different mountain than we actually wanted.
In your experience as a career coach, Patricia, how do you find people who take the wrong job feel about their work and their careers?
It is exhausting. One of the things I talk about a lot are values, and values are so easy to dismiss because they're not at the forefront, and what's not measured is not improved, right? And so those values they're the foundation of how we make decisions, of how we act, of how we respond to situations. And when something that you believe, your value, what you find most important, is not something that you act on every day. And in fact, if you act contrary to that, so let's say that your value is health. And society seems to value money, right? It just comes out everywhere. How much do you get paid? What's your title? Well, if you make the decision based on money, but health is your value, every day that you don't have that balance in your life and that the environment is stressing you out is another day that you are acting not in accordance with your values, and that is absolutely exhausting. That's just one small example, but that's probably one of the first signs is I'm burning out. I'm exhausted. I don't feel like joy, right? And I know there's this whole concept of passion, but there's a difference between I'm not absolutely passionate yet about my work, and there's a completely different concept of, you know, it's drudgery. Like it sucks the life out of me. That's usually one of the big signs.
What difference can taking the wrong job, especially if you do it more than once, have on your career and your next job search?
Oh, goodness. Yeah. Some of the clients that I work with are clients who were like, I've tried doing this on my own multiple times, and now I need a coach because my resume has such a diverse list of careers, which, more and more in the complex, workforce that we're in, that diversity can be a brand. It can, you can figure out what are the unique skill sets that you've gotten that will help you for your next job. However, it's a lot of work figuring out what is that next role. And it's also limiting because now you have breadth, but you don't have depth. And so now you find yourself in a way limited to either have to navigate the twists and turns of, you know, not starting over, but maybe taking a dip before in some stepping positions as I continue to elevate my career in the right direction, or I have to have more limited options if I want to stay at the same level that I'm at because I have, breadth and not depth. So any one skill, I have a certain amount, but it might be a little bit more limited. So that's one of the pieces. And that's one of the reasons why you want to, get this piece early, because even though the world is changing and there's lots of career change going on, that's true. However, you will always be you. And so what we find are about you in terms of what's a great career for you will be maybe not the exact same, but it will be very similar when you're younger as when you're older. You were created in the same way. You as a person don't change drastically. And so that's why the earlier you can get clarity on your career, the smoother your career trajectory will be.
In your work with your clients, Patricia, do they understand in the moment that they have been taking the wrong job?
Sometimes clients will come because they know they're in the wrong job. And sometimes clients will come because they want to get the next position up. And typically when anybody wants to start making a pivot or a change or a transition, right? Even if it is advancement, I always go through clarity first because everyone wants to jump right into the resume. But inevitably, there is some branding that needs to be done before the resume. And to get through the branding, we need to be crystal clear on what we do, what we offer, right? Who we offer it to, and also kind of why we want to go after that. And, to be honest, half the people I work with come because they know they're in the wrong place. And the other half come because they're looking for a next step, but they don't actually realize that they've never took the time to find that clarity. And, the best case scenarios, people, come and we go through clarity and it's a confirmation. And those are just the best moments when it's just, the commitment to that career and that craft is even more impactful once they have that why and that clarity established.
We're going to talk in a moment about how to get that clarity and what to do if you to stop taking the wrong job. But in general, Patricia, what happens in the job searches and the careers of your clients once they understand they don't have to keep taking the wrong job?
Oh gosh, it is like a weight that is just lifted off your shoulders, And if I can just stop for a moment, like, you know, there's so much pressure to be in the exact perfect, passionate dream job. You know what I mean? Like there's such a pressure on that. And I think part of that clarity piece is relieving that pressure and putting some more realistic parameters around what a quote unquote dream job is. And I think part of that is that we live in a world with so many options. And the fact that we live in that world with so many options and that fear of missing out is just haunting us every single day when we go on LinkedIn and Instagram and everywhere else. And I think placing parameters on what the dream job actually is and what levers you can pull, what's realistic, it helps people to find something that's actually there because sometimes they're looking for something that's just non-existent. And so once that happens, that starts to relieve a lot of pressure. And now they're in the real world. Now they're looking for real opportunities and what is truly possible and what would it look like. And, once we get into that more concrete space, we then find that clarity. And once we find that clarity, it just feels like the hill you were climbing up, it feels like you got to the top and now you're just sliding down that hill. It's just the branding is so much easier. The career search is so much easier. And, when you meet with interviewers, things just kind of slide off your tongue because you're clear on who you are, what you offer, and who you offer that to.
Well, hold that thought. When we come back, let's talk about why people do take the wrong job and most importantly, what they can do about it. So we're going to take a break. When we return, Patricia Ortega will continue to share her advice on why you took that wrong job and what you can do about it instead. Here's something I'd like us Americans to get better at this year. Something that our European friends beat us at in spades. It's speaking more than one language. And you can do it sooner than you think with Babbel. Babbel's tips and tools are inspired by the real-life stuff you actually need when communicating. With a focus on conversation, you'll be ready to talk wherever you go. I studied Spanish in Mexico City one summer when I was in college, and a few years ago, I took a sabbatical in Madrid for a month and signed up for daily Spanish classes. Using Babbel this past year has helped me keep and improve the Spanish I learned in Mexico and Spain. Because if you don't use a language, you will lose it. Whether you're learning a new language or you want to improve what you know, Babbel can help. Find out for yourself. Let's get more of you talking in a new language. Babbel is gifting our listeners 60% off subscriptions at babbel.com/dreamjob. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/dreamjob. Spelled BABBEL.com/dreamjob. Babbel.com/dreamjob. Rules and restrictions may apply. Because I run a job board, I talk to applicants almost every day. And many of the people I meet make the same mistake. They have no clear job search goals. So they apply everywhere, every day, all day long. You might think it's smart to send lots of applications. After all, it's a numbers game, right? It's not. The more you narrow your search, the easier everything gets, and the happier you'll be in your next job. Stop chasing every lead. Instead, focus on what you really want. Now, figuring out your goals can be hard, but we have a MaxList resource that can help. Finding focus in your job search. Go to maxlist.org/focus. Our free step-by-step MaxList guide will help you create your own job search goals. Get your copy today. Visit maxlist.org/focus. Again, that's maxlist.org/focus. We're back in the MaxList studio. I'm talking with Patricia Ortega. She's a career coach who helps you forge a new path, find a revitalized purpose, and make a positive impact. Patricia also hosts the Uncommon Career podcast. She joins us from Dallas, Texas. Now, Patricia, in the first segment, we talked about what happens both in your career and your job search and your personal life when you take the wrong job. Let's talk about why people do this and, most importantly, what you can do about it. One reason you say people say yes to the wrong job is because you're making decisions based on external expectations. What do you mean by this, Patricia?
Yeah, I just was working with a client literally, I think it was yesterday, the day before yesterday. And this is a kind of a unique situation, but I found it really interesting. So, her faith is really important to her. And so she was like, I just kind of felt like I needed to surrender and just go wherever God takes me, right? And my faith is important to me too. And so I can understand that. But then at the same time, it was sort of in some ways, I guess you could say uninformed in the sense that she was like, I am just kind of letting things go where they go, right? And in that, she had not created a plan, and she was just like, if this comes up, it comes up, and if this doesn't, it doesn't, and the door will open. And the reality is that even if, she's of Christian faith, and even if you go into the Bible, it still says there's wisdom in a plan and in wise counsel, right? And so to see the whole picture, that was really eye-opening for her. So that's like, one example of, someone who is like, oh, I didn't realize I was doing this. I thought I was doing the right thing. And then there's other situations where you're not quite aware of anything until you realize, oh, why am I changing careers so much? And one particular client that I worked with, she had changed careers from ed tech to, education over to behavioral science. And she had a wealth of skills. Now, this is really interesting because she found that every time she was looking for the same thing, she was looking for a sense of stability. And it took us a while to go through a kind of a pattern discovery and looking at this pattern, not only in her career, but also in her personal life and relationships and other areas. And we found that this pattern was prevalent kind of everywhere. And so that's when we started diving just a little bit deeper. And, there's always space for therapy and counseling if you want to process what happened in the past. But if your goal is to make decisions for the future, this is where that coaching piece comes in of, what we did with her is she was like, okay, I know this pattern exists. And I'm going to work on changing it, but I want to know, is this beneficial for me? And in her instance, she found that this was in some ways beneficial because it was helping her to be really agile in her career, but in other ways, not so helpful because she felt she had to keep restarting. And so with that, we were able then to craft a plan that gives her an ability to change roles, but still have some sort of a plan in place that gives her a sense of control over her career.
So a plan helps you make a better and more informed choice. Let's go back to expectations and what kind of expectations, when you talk to your clients, do you see shape people in making decisions to take a wrong job? Are these external or internal expectations? What typically is going on?
Yeah, sometimes they're external, like, what title, right, am I going to have? And what title sounds great? And I find interesting how commonly we look at a title and we feel emotionally connected to this title more so than the work in maybe a title that for us doesn't sound as appealing. But really, almost every time that I go into this process, there is an external piece that's a symptom of something internal. And so oftentimes that has to do with the expectations that we had growing up, or anything as simple as, an image of a certain career that we had growing up and what that meant and how our family saw it. Family has a lot to do with it. And so often if the family is like, oh, my daughter's going to grow up to be a doctor, right? That stays with us. And deep into our 40s and 50s and beyond, there's this idea of, but I wasn't a doctor, so let me go into selling pharmaceuticals. But I wasn't a doctor, so let me go into, right? And there's always a sort of negotiation of how close we can stay to certain expectations. And so some things that maybe were external at one point can be internalized in another point. So yeah, I think that's one of the pieces where we can talk about external, we could talk about internal, but sometimes they start to blend together.
So external expectations can come from family members or the community where you're in. What about internal expectations, Patricia, particularly the role of fear and emotion? How can that play into the external expectations we set for ourselves that might lead us to saying yes to the wrong job?
Oh my goodness, fear. Fear is one of the biggest barriers. If you're listening right now and you feel you just got like, ugh, because you hear that word, right? There is something that each of us fear. It's just a normal part of the human experience, but it is one of the most impactful emotions we can, that's going to stop us, right? So fear is one of those emotions that can stop us from getting into the career that we want and can stop us from a whole lot more in our life. But, this actually reminds me of a conversation I had with someone. So we're working specifically on clarity. So for 3 months, we were like, we are going to dedicate this time to figuring out what you truly want and how to get there, right? How do we build a bridge? Because, this person was a little bit later in their career, but they realized they really didn't like it. And they were going to make a really a pretty drastic pivot, right? And they're like, before I put this effort in, I need to know what is what is it that could be in the way. And so one of the things that we did is we talked about decision making. And what came up is that fear for the short term guides decisions that have a negative impact in the long term. So in this particular case, it's, money is a big one. I don't want to, and really, money is not the actual fear. The actual fear is loss of stability or loss of control or not having enough, right? So we have to get at what's the underlying fear. And once we get to that underlying fear, then it becomes a question of, okay, is this fear real? And, one of the things that we looked at in her particular situation is there's this fear that in the short term, I'm not going to make as much. And so then we talked about, how, like what a realistic budget is and, how long it would take to, if you have to take a stepping stone position, let's figure out from someone currently in the field, whether it's a recruiter pulling for those positions or someone who's in that role or was in that role in the past 2 to 3 years, let's get the realistic information as far as what will your pay be? How long before you can shift into the next role? What is the next role? What is the average salary there, right? And so once we started kind of pulling back the curtain, the fear tends to dissipate, or you realize, oh, yeah, this fear was a real protection, right? And so we won't know that until we get the information.
So deal with expectations, whether external or internal, with a plan. Look for patterns, identify fears, and steps to address and overcome them. Those are another reason you say people keep taking the wrong job is that you make decisions based on avoidance. You want to avoid something instead of going after what you want. Say more about this, Patricia. What do you have in mind when you say avoidance, and how can you both recognize it and overcome it?
Yeah, this I feel comes up more when you work in a toxic environment or with a bad boss or had a negative experience, right? Oftentimes, what happens is someone will come and there will be this really strong pain of, there was a merger and I was devalued and demoted, and I just never again want to work in an organization that is, has the possibility of a merger. And I mean, the honest answer is that could be almost any organization, right? But now by saying I'm going to say no to every organization that is, you know, smaller than Microsoft, right? Because Microsoft's not going to go through a merger, but all the other ones will. Well, now you're closing the door to other opportunities that might be really great opportunities. And so that's just one way. I mean, every day I hear of people who, when I ask them, okay, well, what role are you interested in? They'll say, well, I don't want to be in a role with the boss who tells me what to do. And I don't want to be in a role where, and what they're really describing is culture. And so sometimes negative aspects at one company that happens to be manufacturing, right? The manufacturing industry now turns them off to the entire manufacturing industry when it's possible there's a million great companies with great culture in that industry. So part of that is figuring out what is it that you don't want, and let's diffuse the emotion from that too. Let's get into there and figure out what caused that dislike of that area and find out if it's truly something that you dislike, that task or maybe that style. And for each of those items, we then come up with some questions that we can ask of, organizations at interviews, right? So if you really didn't like the micromanaging, and we determined this actually truly was micromanaging, then let's draft a question or two, or let's identify the signals that will let you know that a company is not going to be a good fit for you.
Terrific. It's been a great conversation, Patricia. Now, tell us what's next for you.
Yeah. So honestly, we're continuing to improve the podcast. It's growing. And so if you're interested in listening more about your career search and getting into, higher and higher roles and being that top candidate, then you can head over to theuncommoncareerpodcast.com. And then also, I am really enjoying helping people on LinkedIn. It's been a really tough year this year. And so if you connect with me, I'm happy to review your profile. And if you let me know that Max sent you, I'm going to pull out all the stops and send you a video with your entire LinkedIn reviewed. And so that's been a lot of fun for me. And I'm hopeful to see more of those and to see you hop into my DMs and let me know that you want that for yourself as well.
Well, Patricia, that's a very generous offer. We'll be sure to include URLs for your LinkedIn page and your podcast, the Uncommon Career Podcast. Now, Patricia, given all the great advice you've shared today, what's the one thing you want a listener to remember about why you keep taking the wrong job and what to do about it?
Yeah. There's always an answer. There's always an answer, and there's always something you can do about it. And so the first step is talking to people about it and taking some sort, like building some sort of a plan. And, sometimes we think that, well, I don't feel like there's an answer, so why try, right? And we may not say that out loud, but it's kind of in the back of our head, like, I'm never going to find it. I promise you, there's an answer out there and there's a way to get to it. And you have to, if dig on your own, dig with other people. If you need to, call a coach, call an expert. I'm happy to have a conversation with you. There's always an answer.
Next week, our guest will be Felicia Ann Rose Anuha. She's a career coach and the host of the Trill MBA show. Her podcast empowers Black women to thrive in corporate America. You need to network when you do a job search, but connecting with others may make you feel awkward. Join us next Wednesday when Felicia Ann Rose Anuha and I talk about how to overcome the discomfort of networking. Until next time, thanks for letting us help you find your dream job. This show is produced by Max List. Susan Thornton Huff schedules our guests and writes our newsletter. Lisa Kislen-Barry Anderson manages our social media. Our sound engineer and editor is Matt Fiorillo. Dawn Mole creates our transcripts, and our music is by Freddie Trujillo. This is Mac Pritchard. See you next week.